Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're exploring the life of someone who's, well, really managed a career full of interesting, maybe even profound contradictions.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
How does someone with degrees in political science journalism end up as a stand-up, known for, pretty crude blue comedy, and at the same time hold down a major role on a serious financial drama?
It really is a path that defies easy labels.
It totally does.
We are diving deep into the sources you shared about Dan Soder, an artist who, for almost a decade, was successfully juggling stand-up, acting, and that really unique, challenging world of live satellite radio.
Right. So our mission today is to quickly pull out the key insights into his journey. We need to see past just Dudley Mafee from Billions, obviously a huge role for
Well,
him.
absolutely central, yeah.
But to really understand him as like this deep-rooted figure in the New York City comedy scene, that whole ecosystem.
Exactly. So, high level. Dan Soder, born 83. He's an American stand-up, an actor, and a radio personality. And that dual fame is kind of remarkable because the audiences don't always overlap,
Not at all.
You've got the Billions crowd, interested in a high finance, complex drama. And then you've got the really, really loyal fan base for the Bonfire on SiriusXM. He co-hosted that from 2015 right up until 2023.
And you see right away his career's been defined by committing to those three main things: stand-up, radio, TV, keeping all those plates spinning at a high level. That takes immense focus, serious discipline with scheduling.
It really does.
And maybe, surprisingly, that discipline could trace back to his academic life. But okay, let's start at the beginning. Where did he get this sort of foundational perspective?
Okay, so geographically, the journey starts in Hartford, Connecticut. That's where he was born. Background is Irish and Swedish. But the really formative years, those were spent growing up in Aurora, Colorado.
Okay. East Coast roots, Western upbringing.
Yeah, that kind of blend. It often gives a comic a specific viewpoint, maybe a bit more grounded somehow.
And then we look at his education, and this is where it gets, well, pretty striking. The sources say Smoky Hill High School, then University of Arizona, graduated 2005.
Uh-huh.
And the degrees. Journalism and political science. I mean, that's a curriculum built for analyzing policy, elections, investigative stuff. How does that connect to the kind of, observational but blue comedy he ended up doing?
Well, that's the really interesting part, isn't it? Journalism, political science. These fields train you to observe, to synthesize information, report complex things pretty concisely.
Right, spotting patterns.
Exactly, spotting patterns in human behavior, policy failures, whatever. So maybe he didn't end up reporting from Capitol Hill, but he definitely applied that kind of intellectual toolkit to stand-up. Just instead of analyzing policy, he's analyzing pop culture or everyday weirdness, human flaws.
Huh. It's like he learned the how of observation in college and just pointed at different subjects. The academic path was serious, but the comedy bug clearly bit him pretty hard while he was still there.
Oh, yeah. While he was still a student at U of A, he started doing stand-up. It was an immediate pivot, apparently.
Wow.
And that commitment was strong. Just a year after graduating in 2005, he makes the big move, New York City, 2006, to pursue comedy full-time. He knew, I guess, that the New York grind was where he needed to be to really hone his craft.
But before he jumped into that really competitive comedy world, we should probably acknowledge the sources mentioned some significant personal tragedies early on. These kinds of losses, I mean, they often fuel a comedian's worldview, right? Their resilience.
It often seems that way in comedy, yeah. And the sources do highlight some defining losses for Soder. While he was still in high school, his father passed away after a long illness. Then, just 2 years later, devastatingly, his sister died in a car crash.
Wow. 2 huge losses, one slow, one sudden,
Right.
hitting him right in those really formative teenage years. It's hard to imagine that kind of pain not informing his later stuff somehow.
Yeah.
Lending maybe a darker edge or perspective, even to lighter topics.
Definitely. And that resilience you mentioned, it's absolutely crucial for surviving that initial brutal grind of the New York comedy scene.
For sure.
And if we look back even earlier, there's that sort of amazing, almost movie-like bit of trivia from his childhood.
Yeah, the Mike McDaniel connection.
Exactly. His close childhood friendship with Mike McDaniel, who's now, head coach of the Miami Dolphins.
It's such a wild connection. This brilliant kind of eccentric NFL coach and this blue comedian who's also known for playing a finance guy. But they grew up together in Aurora, Colorado.
It's just a great example of how talent develops side by side,
Yeah.
Two people who went into these incredibly demanding fields, one needing deep strategic thinking, like coaching, and the other needing deep observational and analytical skill, like comedy and acting. Both need serious discipline, just applied in totally different ways. It says a lot, I think, about the environment they shared growing up.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, so let's shift into the core of his craft then, the stand-up. For someone listening who wants to understand, like, the technical side of his style, how would we break down the Soder brand of humor?
Well, the sources give us a pretty detailed map of his genres. It paints him as a specialist in that kind of edgy but still grounded school of comedy. We're talking observational first and foremost. That's the baseline, probably from that journalistic training.
Right.
But then layered on top, you've got blue comedy, crude humor, off-color stuff, insult comedy, impersonations, and a lot of sarcasm.
So it's where that high-structure observer meets the sometimes lowbrow subject matter,
Yeah,
using that analytical eye to dissect things people usually dismiss.
precisely. Yeah. Blue comedy, just for clarity, is usually material that leans on vulgarity, sex themes, profanity, often delivered pretty unfiltered.
Yeah.
What Soder does, I think, is bring this dry, often self-deprecating intelligence to that vulgarity, which kind of elevates it beyond just shock value.
Good.
And his subjects, pulled straight from that observational training, everyday life, pop culture, how people act, sex, recreational drugs, celebrities, current events. He seems to apply the same focus to a joke about getting high as a poli-sci major would to analyzing, like, a trade agreement. It's the method, not just the subject, that hints at his background.
That sharp observation definitely seemed to help him get noticed early on. Let's chart that guest era you mentioned, those early national exposure points that kind of paved the way for his radio career. What were the key steps there?
Yeah, his early TV visibility was really important for establishing his persona. He was on MTV2's Guy Code a lot, like a frequent face across seasons 3 to 5. That's 2013 to 2015.
Oh yeah, Guy Code. That show launched a lot of comics.
It really did. Huge exposure to a key demographic. And at the same time, he's climbing the stand-up ladder,
Yeah.
doing Comedy Central's The Half Hour, getting those crucial late-night spots, like on Conan.
Right. Building legitimacy.
Yeah. But maybe the most significant apprenticeship, sort of a trial by fire, was in satellite radio. He plugged into that notoriously volatile world pretty quickly, appeared on podcasts like Come Town, and really crucially became a frequent guest on the Anthony Cumia show.
Okay, and that connects directly to his regular gig on the show that really launched his SiriusXM career, right? The sources say after the whole Anthony Cumia firing.
Right, the controversy.
So Natter became a frequent guest, kind of the third mic, on the Opie with Jim Norton show. That was on Faction Talk.
Exactly. And that environment, post-controversy, super uncensored, live 4 days a week, that was the real proving ground. It wasn't just popping in as a guest. It was like a residency that tested if he could be quick, improvisational, funny under pressure, consistently.
Working alongside Jim Norton, too, who's known for being incredibly sharp.
Oh, yeah. That apprenticeship on Opie with Jim Norton, it definitely prepared him for the kind of demanding schedule that was just around the corner.
We also probably shouldn't skip over his connection early on with arguably one of the biggest comedy forces of the mid-2010s, Amy Schumer.
Good point. Yeah.
He guest starred on Inside Amy Schumer 4 times between 2014 and 2016 and had that small but, memorable part in Trainwreck in 2015.
Right, the dumpster guy.
Yeah.
Being part of that Schumer circle was a huge seal of approval in the NYC comedy scene back then. Even playing dumpster guy put his name in the credits of a major movie, kind of bridging his exposure from niche radio and stand-up towards the Hollywood mainstream. It just shows how well he networked within that scene early on, maximizing his visibility across different platforms.
Okay, so solid foundation, then stand-up, successful apprenticeship in pretty wild live radio. So the Nelder then launches into what really became the defining radio era for him, the Bonfire. This is where he cemented his identity and built this massive dedicated following.
Yeah, the Bonfires launched July 27, 2015. That was huge for him. Partnering with Big J. Okerson, another great comic, they created something really unique, I think.
How so?
Well, it wasn't like a typical morning show, with planned bits or even a structured interview show. It felt more like an authentic, often of chaotic, just stream of consciousness hang. Like you were in the green room with two of the sharpest, funniest guys at the club.
Right, that feeling of eavesdropping.
Exactly. And it started on SiriusXM's Comedy Central radio. But the commitment level, right from the start, this wasn't just a weekly podcast thing.
No, definitely not.
No, it's a huge time sink, needed incredible consistency. It quickly ramped up to airing Monday through Thursday, 2 hours live, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern. Hosting live, uncensored, 4 times a week. week that forces you to constantly generate material from everything around you.
8 hours a week of live radio. Why?
Yeah, it's a real application of those journalistic observation skills, but applied to the immediate moment constantly.
And their chemistry, Soder and Okerson's, it became pretty legendary in that world. What was the dynamic that clicked so well with the audience for, what, 8 years?
Well, Okerson brought that big, loud, often really self-deprecating energy, the sort of ultimate fun-loving older brother type. Soder, drawing on that analytical side we talked about, was often the drier, sharper, quicker wit, the foil. He'd be the one maybe synthesizing the chaos or dropping that unexpected killer punchline. That balance, Big J's warmth and Soder's sort of cutting observation, it made listeners feel really involved, like part of an ongoing, unfiltered chat about life, pop culture, the comedy scene. That personal connection is key for satellite radio.
And it's interesting how the show navigated the business side of things, the volatility of satellite radio.
Yeah.
They didn't stay put on one channel the whole time.
No, they didn't. And that says a lot about their resilience, I think. In March 2021, Comedy Central Radio basically pulled the plug on all its talk shows. So the Bonfire had to move. They shifted over to the Faction Talk channel, adjusted their time slot a bit, 5 to 7 p.m. ET. And the fact that their audience, this huge, established fan base, just followed them. It proves the show's success was about them, the hosts, their chemistry, not just the channel brand. They were kind of corporate restructure proof.
That's impressive. So that 8-year run, delivering that high-level, high-commitment radio, it ended fairly recently. Can you give us the timeline for the end of that partnership?
Sure. Soder's departure was announced February 22, 2023, so that wrapped up the 8-year tenure. But the transition, it kind of speaks to how tight that NYC comedy scene is. He was replaced by another well-known comic from that circle, Robert Kelly, so there was continuity for the audience.
And Soder, true to form, didn't really take a break. He immediately spun that huge audio platform he'd built into new independent podcast projects, kept that output going for his audience.
Instantly, yeah. Launched his solo thing, Soder, in November 2023, capitalizing directly on his name and his, distinct point of view.
Right.
And then early 2024, he co-launches The Regs, joining an existing group with Luis J. Gomez, Joe List, and Robert Kelly, the guy who just replaced him on The Bonfire.
Okay, yeah.
It's a great example of how that scene works. Competition, sure, but also a lot of collaboration, keeping the talent working together even if they switch chairs or platforms.
Okay, time to pivot now to the third dimension of his career, acting. And specifically, the longest, most widely recognized role, the one that introduced him to a whole different global audience, far from the blue comedy radio fans. Dudley Mafee on Billions.
Yeah, the Billions role. Started late 2016, ran right through 2023. This is maybe the ultimate example of that professional sport we talked about.
Yeah.
Mafee isn't a comedian, not really a sidekick in the traditional sense. He's a key recurring character on a prestige drama series about, the moral gray areas of high finance.
And what makes Mafee work so well as a character, especially with Soder playing him?
Well, Mafee often functions as the audience's way-in, right? And the comedic relief, but still a highly competent guy. He's often the slightly awkward one, the nervous one, but maybe the most fundamentally ethical person inside the pretty morally bankrupt world of Axe Capital.
I feel for him.
You do.
Yeah.
And Soder's delivery, that dry, grounded quality, that inherent observational skill, it makes Mafee a believable counterpoint to the huge egos and, frankly, sociopathy of the main characters. His ability to deliver serious lines, but with this underlying current of, nervous, honesty. It's the total opposite of his stand-up persona, and it really shows his range as an actor.
It really is remarkable.
Yeah.
One day he's riffing, totally uncensored, about God knows what on live radio, and the next day he's on set delivering complex dialogue about market manipulation for Showtime. That's a level of professional separation not many artists can pull off.
It really speaks to discipline, doesn't it? Maybe learned back in that Polishite program. You have to understand the structure of the world you're in, whether it's the structure of a joke or the structure of a multi-billion-dollar hedge fund. He somehow maintains the integrity of two completely different performance worlds at the same time.
Okay, let's quickly run through the timeline of his stand-up specials. These are the purest expression of his comedy, right?
Yeah.
And they show a clear climb up the distribution ladder.
Right. So first hour-long special was not special. That came out on Comedy Central in 2016, established his early style, showed he could hold an hour.
Okay.
A year later, 2017, he's part of that big Netflix push for stand-up. He had a tight 30-minute set on the final episode of their series, The Stand-Up.
And then the big one, the sort of ultimate validation for mainstream stand-up appeal, getting an HBO special.
Yeah, absolutely. Son of a Gary. That dropped in 2019. HBO, I mean, that's still often seen as the peak for stand-up specials. Signals critical and commercial success. And Son of a Gary, it felt like a comic maturing a bit. More reflective material, maybe touching on some of that earlier tragedy we mentioned, but still keeping the edge and the sharp observations showed he could really craft a compelling hour-long narrative.
And even after leaving the daily radio grind, he kept producing stand-up. His latest special, On the Road, came out in 2024, but this time on YouTube.
Yeah, and that move's interesting too. Shows his confidence in his fan base, right? And comfort going direct to consumer, releasing it himself on YouTube, bypassing the traditional networks. It shows the kind of leverage audience-wise and maybe financially that he built up over all those years on radio and acting.
We should probably also mention his supporting movie work, like playing Randall in that 2019 comedy Drunk Parents. Alec Baldwin, Salma Hayek. Just keeping his hand even in supporting roles.
Yeah, it rounds out the filmography. But if we're looking for those things that really resonate with his core fans, those aha moments, we have to talk about that specific niche expertise he has. His deep love for pro wrestling, and especially that legendary impression.
Ah, yes, the Macho Man. This is crucial for understanding his whole vibe. Soder's a lifelong wrestling fan, and it's not just casual fandom. It's baked into his persona, particularly through his impression of Macho Man Randy Savage.
And it's considered top tier for a reason. Doing impressions well, it's not just mimicking a voice. It's understanding the cadence, the timing, the whole personality behind it. So during nailing the unpredictable intensity and just bizarre phrasing of Macho Man, it proves he's a real deep-cut expert. He's applying that same observational rigor to the tiny details of this niche pop culture icon.
And that passion actually turned into professional gigs, right?
Yeah.
Monetizing that deep knowledge.
The sources confirm that, yeah. He guested on the Wrestling Soup podcast back in March 2016, kind of a nod to that community. And importantly, his impression skills landed him voice acting work. In 2022, he actually voiced the Macho Man character in 5 episodes of the animated show Paradise PD.
Wow.
When you can turn a really specific, high-quality impression into paid acting work, you know you found a sweet spot.
Okay, let's bring in some recent personal context, too. Connections that have maybe broadened his public profile even more. We should probably touch on his partnership with Katie Nolan, the sports personality.
Right. December 2022, Katie Nolan announced their engagement, publicly confirmed they'd been together for a while. And that's a classic kind of merging of two very visible media spheres, right? Comedy acting meets sports media.
And looking back through the sources, it's not totally out of the blue. He'd appeared on her Fox Sports 1 show, Garbage Time with Katie Nolan, earlier in his career.
Yeah, it just reinforces that idea of how interconnected the New York media and comedy worlds are. Professional collaborations often bleed into personal relationships, which further cements his position across different industry segments. He's not just stuck in the comedy bubble. He interacts with high-profile people across the media landscape.
So just to give the listener the full picture of his work rate, let's quickly recap his consistent TV film stuff over the last decade or so. It just shows how he was juggling all this.
It really is a decade of steady work. Okay, so 2013-2015, Guy Code, 2014-2016, Inside Amy Schumer, Trainwreck movie, 2015, then the big acting commitment, Billions, running 2016 all the way through 2023.
Right.
Plus Drunk Parents in 2019, Flatbush Misdemeanors in 2022. I mean, that's basically a full-time screen career happening alongside the daily grind of the Bonfire and touring as a stand-up.
It's pretty intense.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's step back. Look at the whole arc of Dan Soder's career. We started with this idea of contradiction. The serious academic background versus the crude comedy. How do we synthesize his success? What does this career tell us about the kind of discipline needed to succeed across such different platforms?
Well, what's fascinating, I think, is that the evidence suggests the rigor wasn't ditched, it was just re-aimed. Soder seems to have succeeded because he brought the discipline of a reporter and a political scientist, you know, observation, synthesis, working under pressure, meeting deadlines, like 4 live shows a week.
Yeah.
He brought that discipline to the seemingly chaotic worlds of blue comedy and live radio.
So he used that formal training to impose structure where maybe you wouldn't expect it. Maintain these multiple high-profile roles for almost 10 years by treating comedy and acting with the same kind of seriousness he might have once applied to political science.
Exactly. He's like a living embodiment of that tension between analysis and absurdity. He took the tools for serious reporting and pointed them at the human condition, whether that's crafting a complex joke about celebrity meltdowns or playing a character dealing with billions of dollars in high finance. switching between being McAfee and being that sharp, quick radio host.
Oh.
That took more than just talent. It required immense professional focus and, yeah, discipline.
Which brings up a really interesting question for you, the listener, as you think about this journey. Soder's degrees, right? Journalism and political science fields focused on facts, structure. But his main comedy vehicle, heavily focused on pop culture drug use, his biggest acting role, a financial drama about moral ambiguity.
Yeah, so we have to ask, which part of that highly structured background do you think was the most crucial tool for him? Was it the college training and analytical observation? Was it the trial by fire of that early radio apprenticeship on Opie with Jim Norton? Or maybe even the resilience built from early tragedy, or the discipline learned hanging out with a rigorous mind like Coach McDaniel back in childhood? Which of those was the key ingredient for sustained success across such different improvisational fields for so long?
It really makes you think that true comedic depth might require, well, depth of knowledge.
Mhm.
It's not just about being funny, right? It's about understanding why something's funny, how to sustain it, and how to deliver it consistently across 4 different platforms week after week. It's a powerful thought to chew on. The intellectual discipline of a journalist fueling the success of a blue comedian.
Always great unpacking a career with such compelling contradictions.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We look forward to hearing your thoughts.